Welcome to the Skeptic's Guide to Investing with Steve Davenport and Clem Miller. Every 2 weeks, Steve and Clem bring you brief investment insights you may not find anywhere else. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Here are Steve and Clem.
Hello and welcome to Skeptic's Guide to Investing with Clem Miller and myself, Steve Davenport. In this episode, we're going to talk about Alphabet, still often called Google. Yesterday, Alphabet had a conference for its certified software developers. Alphabet rolled out a series of new products and product improvements. Clem, can you share with us what was unveiled at the developers conference?
Okay, so Google, that is Alphabet, has a product called Gemini, and that is their AI product. Think of it as being like the more famous OpenAI, which is affiliated now with Microsoft. So you got Gemini, and Gemini is their generative AI, and they are, in effect, trying to incorporate Gemini into the entire product line of Alphabet, and also trying to create the capabilities technologically that allow Gemini to operate. So in terms of chips as well as data center technologies. So that's what they're doing. That's what the presentation was yesterday. The presentation was absolutely awesome in terms of the ability of essentially a new type of Google search generative experience is what they call it, which will provide all sorts of information on a multimedia basis and actually anticipate the questions that you want answered. So it's kind of, take OpenAI, but make it more sort of search focused. And that's what you get with the search generative experience of the new Gemini powered Google.
That's interesting. Imagine this Gemini model and many of its specific versions would require a huge expansion in computer power. Has anybody thought about how ready the market is for any of these ideas? Because it feels to me like we've got a shortage in terms of the chips we need for this type of technology.
Okay, so Steve, there are really two types of chips that are useful in this area. One are the graphical processing units, the GPUs that are used, basically to support the NVIDIA computer stack, and we've all heard about the GPUs. We've done some of these podcasts, or at least one podcast on NVIDIA and its GPUs. And what Alphabet is doing is they have a partnership with NVIDIA, like some of the other Magnificent Seven companies have. They also have partnerships with NVIDIA. But the real big thing, and different thing that Google is doing, that Alphabet's doing, is they have been developing their own chips. And they call it the Tensor line of chips. And the last iteration of this, the 6th generation, is called Trillium. And I think that's a play on trillions, because they want to be able to process trillions of transactions, of information transactions at any one point in time. So it's the Trillium chips, and those are CPU chips, and they are used in the data centers to produce million, or as I said, trillions of calculations to support the Google or the Google Gemini model.
It feels like we're looking for a whole new level of adjectives to describe this world of CPUs and transactions per second and decisions. Is Alphabet, Meta, Microsoft, and I saw recently that Tesla has a deal now with Oracle for using the databases to try to help them with some of this decision making and servers and networks. Do you think that there's a clear leader coming out of this, or has somebody figured out the path forward ahead of the others, or is this simply everyone is scattering in their own way to try to come up with their solution, but nobody really knows whether any of the solutions are particularly better or worse than the others?
Well, I think, Steve, we're in the first or second innings for generative AI in terms of what it can do. And to quote Mao Zedong, let 1,000 flowers bloom, right? I think that, or was that Deng Xiaoping? I forget. But anyway, let 1,000 flowers bloom. The idea being that you're going to have all sorts of variations on generative AI that are being developed by all sorts of companies, and not just Magnificent Seven companies, but by a whole series of smaller companies as well. It's just we hear a lot about the big companies, the big tech companies, but I think we're going to see a lot of those smaller companies develop very viable products, and then perhaps be scooped up by the big tech company. I think, though, it's early innings. I think right now we're seeing somewhat different use cases for generative AI at the different big firms. And I think that over time, really, it's hard to say whether those use cases will harden into different paths for each of the companies, or whether there will be some more convergence of technologies and thus greater competition.
Yeah, it feels to me like we had this same thing when we talked about operating systems. When we had operating systems, we had a bifurcation, right? There was the Microsoft operating system and there was the Apple system. And then we had the cell phones and we had, the iOS of Apple, and we have, Samsung and others. It feels like there's going to be an A and a B. When I look at this, I love your analogy to the innings, because to me, everybody knows what a 9-inning game is, and when you're near the end of it, and when you're kind of in the beginning of. But when I look at this term artificial intelligence, it kind of bothers me a little bit, because when we think about artificiality, means it's not real, and in some ways we've been doing artificial intelligence for a while. You look at your tax returns. You look at some of the QuickBooks. You look at some of the ways that we take information and information is assimilated for us using a set of algorithms or rules. And the difference between that and generative AI, I agree there's a difference. But I also think that what we're really seeing here is just a continuation. And so, to go a little bit off track here, I'm having an artificial hip put in the beginning of June. And so I said to myself, gee, is this when did this really start? The first artificial hip was put in 1891. And we've had various forms of metal and plastic, ceramic, all types of different materials used in this procedure for 100 years. And I look at it and say, to me, this is new. This is something that I need to understand. It's uncertain. And then I look at doctors and say, they've been doing this for years. They've been doing this procedure. And so are we a little bit naive to say that artificial intelligence is really just arriving now? Because it really feels like we've been finding ways to artificially supplement our lives, whether it's physical prosthetics or whether it's in trying to use software to solve real problems.
Yeah. So, Steve, you're the bionic, or you will be the bionic man soon.
I will. I'm just trying to figure out if they can, maybe put a chip in me and I'd start to become much more agreeable and easygoing and it would improve my investment results.
Well, I mean, speaking of that, you had this experiment recently that Musk had with his company Neuralink. You may have seen that, where they had to pull out the chip, but they put a chip in a guy's brain to allow this guy to move objects around on a screen just by thinking about it, which I think is kind of a crazy thing. And I'm not sure I would want a chip ever put into my brain, but I imagine some people might. And of course, it has some utility
Also,
for
looking at
disabled.
people with prosthetics, and there's people now who are able to help these people by perceiving the end of their fingers and be able to think about and achieve a sense of feeling from this artificial limb, which if we're getting to that point, does artificial, is it replacement? Is it?
Right.
But let's get back to Google. I
Right.
guess.
Well, let me just say something first. I think generative AI is a category of the broader artificial intelligence. I know sometimes people just use the expression AI to refer to generative AI, but the point you're making, which I totally agree with, is that artificial intelligence, AI, robotics, just goes way beyond what we're seeing here with OpenAI and Google and the others in terms of this generative AI experience. Goes way beyond that. It goes to self-driving cars, and so on.
Let's talk about Alphabet's Waymo project. What do you think about how Waymo and the cabs will influence, or are they a leader? Are they a follower? Is Tesla still, Uber? Who is going to win in this space? And does it matter to us?
So, for those of you who may not know, Waymo is the autonomous car company or autonomous car vehicle that Google has developed, and it is now driving around the streets of a couple of U.S. cities in a taxi formation. And I would say, it's still in kind of beta testing. It's had some accidents, although it would be very interesting to see data comparing Waymo's accident rate to the accident rates of basically human beings driving around those cities. We might be surprised to learn that Waymo is actually pretty good. But I would say, to your question, Steve, about Waymo versus Tesla, I think Waymo and Tesla appeal to different kinds of consumers. I think, there are people, and especially in the big cities, who just don't like driving, who don't like
Sure.
being in the driver's seat. They want to be ferried around, right, as if they were in a bus or a taxi. And that's what Waymo does for those folks. Waymo has a great utility as a taxi. On the other hand, you've got folks who like to be in the driver's seat, and they like to be assisted in their driving. They may or may not want to have something close to full self-driving, but at the very least, they want to be in the driver's seat to monitor what's going on screens, and that's what Tesla gives them. I've had the opportunity to test drive a full self-driving Tesla, and it was quite an interesting experience. I got to tell you that, in terms of weaving in and out of crazy traffic. I thought I was going to die, but a lot of people in the front seats of those vehicles sort of like what they like what they're experiencing. And so I basically see Waymo and Tesla as two different user cases, two different groups of consumers.
You didn't mention YouTube. Obviously, this is the most successful video platform, except maybe for TikTok.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that one of the things that we have to look at is this effort already passed by Congress to perhaps get rid of TikTok, at least in the United States, for what I would say to be geopolitical reasons, more so than anything else. And you're going to have two beneficiaries to that. One is YouTube Shorts, and the other one is Meta, that is Facebook Reels. But I think that that YouTube Shorts is going to be the winner in that kind of competition if TikTok is forced to withdraw from the market. I mean,
the anti-monopoly action against the U.S. big tech has started to happen. And where do you think Meta, Microsoft, and Alphabet stack up in terms of having a problem with the government actions? Will one be more affected than the other?
So I think what we're seeing in Europe with the EU is much more, I think, troubling for the big tech companies than what we're seeing in the United States. And that comes from the different nature of EU competition and digital markets policies, digital markets being a relatively new rule in the EU. And what that difference is that in the US, there's a focus on horizontal competition. By that, I mean the US doesn't want to see big competitors buying each other and creating market concentration. And there's less of a focus on big companies gobbling up smaller companies. In Europe, it's the opposite situation where, yeah, I mean, there's some concern about big companies gobbling each other up, but the bigger issue is bigger companies gobbling up smaller companies, making it difficult for smaller companies to do business and then ultimately absorbing them. And that's what the EU is very concerned about with respect to US big tech. They don't want US big tech to interfere in the normal historical traditional running of those economies, which has been, which in Europe has been focused more on small and medium-sized business.
So, Clem, let's look at our mailbag. As you can probably guess, the question is, do you own Alphabet in your portfolio? And if so, why? Clem, you go first.
Okay, so obviously innovation and the broad product set are important considerations for me on a qualitative basis. And then when you look at the quantitative screens that I use, and I'm not going to go into all the numbers here, but I look at growth, and revenue growth, earnings growth has been strong. Profitability and cash flow generation, very strong. Lots of cash buybacks using the free cash flow generation, very strong. Valuation, actually not that expensive. So I think that's a good thing. It's not, crazy expensive like Tesla is or NVIDIA can be at times. So relatively inexpensive. In terms of how short sellers look at the market, look at Google, I think that look at Alphabet, I should say. Short sellers have very little short interest in Alphabet, so that's good. And lastly, one of the things I look at are Glassdoor ratings for companies, and in order to determine employee satisfaction as a sort of a proxy for corporate quality. And the Glassdoor rating for Alphabet is actually pretty good. So employees are very satisfied with the company. So really across the board, it's it's really strong. And I would say, if it has, sometimes some weaker performance, I think you can expect that weaker performance to be turned around into stronger performance. So it's really a core buy and hold stock for me.
Yep. I agree with almost all the aspects that you said. I think that the question has been, why has it kind of lagged? I think that for a while, it felt like it wasn't participating in the Magnificent Seven, and it has recently come back and started to perform better. But I believe that it's an integral part of the economy. I think it's an integral part of technology, and I think it's got good management in place to deliver on the project areas it has. And it also has some projects that are, I think, a little bit of what I like to see call reach projects, where they're going down a path that could have huge potential, but they're one of the few people who can do that because they have the resources. So I like Google as an investment. It's been in our portfolios. It's in the space of communication services, I'd say it's probably our number one name. I think that when we look at this stock, we see something that has daily usage of individuals, and it feels to me like they're going to be one of the people who get into that first integration of AI for individuals, not for businesses, but for individuals. I think they start to do things which will impact people's lives. So thanks everybody for listening to the podcast today. Stay tuned for another episode of Skeptic's Guide to Investing. We're doing other episodes on meme stocks and the Fed. So please check us out, and please let us know what you like and what you don't like, and we'll try to continue to get better.
The views shared on this podcast represent the personal investment views of the hosts. They are for educational purposes and not meant to be taken as investment advice. Listeners should consult their own investment, legal, and tax advisors. Past performance of any investments is not a guarantee for future return.